Good morning or good evening. Today, our group will be presenting media usage in Thailand, and the event that we chose is called Black May. In this presentation, we will present in 5 parts. First is the history, second is the surrounding, third, theory, fourth, demography, and lastly, analysis. So we'll begin by talking about the history of Black May. Before Black May occurred, we will first go back to the year of 1991 when Prime Minister named General Chachai Chunhawan was in power during that time. However, he was suspected to be involved in the corruption, so the coup led by General Sujinda took over the government and the Prime Minister himself. In the meantime, the coup decided to select Mr. Anand Panyarachun to be the substitute prime minister for General Chachai Chunhawan until the 22nd of March in 1992, when the new election began. Many of the House of Representatives favored General Sujinda to become the next prime minister. But first, we have to mention that before the election, General Sujinda came out to the public to make a promise with the Thai citizens that he would absolutely not take the position of the next prime minister, so he was not the candidate of this election. However, he decided to become the next prime minister. Not only that, he also came out to the public and stated that he had to sacrifice his promise to the duty of nation, which caused the anger of people in Thailand. This was not the only reason that caused the protests. The other reason was that many of the university students and also working class people, surprisingly, call out for the new type of democracy because people who lived during that time, they believed that that version of democracy was not the true democracy. So that was why the protest began on the 17th of May in 1992. The protest was in a very peaceful way because people were just on the street marching and calling out General Sujinda to quit his position. However, on the same day and on that night, the police and the soldiers were ordered by General Sujinda to start using weapons to stop the protests, which caused many casualties and also injuries. With that sight, King Rama IX could not handle that anymore, so he decided to summon General Sujinda and General Chamlung, who was the leader of the protest, to discuss about the solution to this problem. So by the end of 20th, not by the end, by the beginning of the 20th of May, General Sujinda decided to withdraw the order and also withdraw from his position, which caused many Thai people to be happy with their victory in this movement. To sum up, the cause of Black May was because of General Sujinda not keeping his promise and also people calling out for the new type of democracy. So now we'll be talking about surrounding next.
The second topic we will discuss is the surrounding, including the economic, political, cultural, and media landscapes during the Black May. So first is the culture. Starting with national identity, in the 1950s, Thai identity was centralized by the previous leader Marshal Black Pribun Songkram. For example, in promoting national dress or national language, to prevent Western influence that might harm national security. Later in 1980s, the Thai identity started to bring back the regional and local culture, for example, like local food or traditional dress. This also occurred with support of the democratic movement at that time. Another point is the royal institutions. So, even though the royal family did not have direct or major political power, the king was still heavily involved in the culture as the sole and spiritual leader who protected national security and peace. This can be seen from the example where one's government needs to be blessed by the king to gain public recognition.
Now on to the politics sides. In 1932, Thai politics has been divided into two sides, the king as the highest power and the democratic sides, similarly to how it is now between the right and the left wings in Thailand. In 1960s, it was the age of Thanapapat. The idea of having family member promoted in the military was very prominent. This shows that the military became more important and was thought of as important. In the 1973, it was a popular uprising of 14 October, which was kind of paved the way for the event of Black May. This event highlights the importance and the growing presence of Thai university students in politics. In 1980s, it was the decades of semi-democracy, which means that the power against the military grew stronger. Lastly, in 1991, it was the creation of the Samaki Tham Party, or the STP. This creation was rooted from the conflicts among the brothers in Chula Chongkla Royal Military Academy. Next, on to the economics. The three major things that happened during the economics of this event is first, the commercial rice market. In 1960s, Thailand opened up a commercial rice market, which means that the farmers were given rights to farm by the king. This creates a flourish economics and it became one of our Thailand's main exports. Next, in 1970s, it was the growth of the middle class people. The middle class was one of the driving force of this event, Black May, and it's very important to this event that the class grew and increased in number. Lastly is the worldwide economic recession. Since Thailand opened the commercial rice market, our economics has been good and flourished, but it was slowed down due to the worldwide recession due to the oil resources.
Last is the media. In the mid 1980s, print media played an important role in delivering both domestic and foreign news. Since newspapers are privately owned, they are regarded as more credible than mass media under the government censorship restrictions. So this is where anything that may affect the monarchy or government affairs was unpublished. So during the event, despite knowing that the media were being controlled by the government, people still use various media to receive news, mainly radio, newspaper, and television. The event was also known as the mobile phone mob, as the protesters, mainly the middle class, used mobile phones to communicate personally.
Now on to the theory and concept of this event. First, we agreed that second reality can be applied with the media usage of this event. Second reality is something that generates a group sense while having individual consciousness. People can be group-minded self-consciously and programmatically. So in the end, the receiver can consciously choose what group they will belong to. In this case, whether they side with the protester or with the military. As you can see, we have divided into two main medium, the television and the newspaper. Television is second orality medium. But the ownership of the television during that time was controlled, monitored, and censored by the government and the military. So it may be biased and manipulated by them. The content of the television is real-time reports of the protests and video of the footage. So one of our interviewees has reported that they feel that television is more reliable than newspaper because they get to have this universal group experience with the people in the protest, even when they're sitting at home watching television. But the second medium is newspaper. It is a written culture, but it's good in that sense because written newspaper during that time was privately owned, so the government cannot interfere with the newspaper. And 5 out of 6 of our interview, we regarded newspaper as much more credible than television. But the content of the newspaper is quite different from television in the sense that it includes pictures, interview of the first-hand experience, and more of detailed information about the process itself. Second, the freedom of press. Our interviewee have reported that only Channel 3, 5, 7, and 9 broadcasted about the event of Black May. And one of our interviewees said that every channel is pretty neutral except Channel 5 because Channel 5 belongs to the military, so some of the information are manipulated and they wouldn't say anything that would hurt the military. But in the end, a lot of channels ended up being blocked or the signal being cut by the military due to the aggressiveness of the protests. And mass media plays a big role in dispersing the news about the protest since people would hear the announcement or anything from the television and radio. Lastly, news broadcaster would speak from the third person perspective or the omniscient perspective, so they wouldn't insert any of their own private opinion into it, so that the watcher of the television could feel that they could make their own interpretation and individual consciousness of the event themselves.
Thirdly, we would like to touch on the topic of the press's power on holding the message and analyzing on that topic as well. What I will be touching on is the purpose and intent of mass media before and after, or the steadfast reliability of certain mass media, and also how it affects the people's view on mass media in general and their importance to the population. So the purpose and intent of mass media before and after Blood May, for example, television has changed, which has also been stated by Pathanan in the previous slide. Before, it was mainly for informing individuals about certain things. In the context of Blood May, even our interviewers have been getting information through television, but afterwards, propaganda, the releasing of curfew, and bias towards the government has been stated, censorship has been stated more than informing the general public about Blood May after violence, the crackdown of the violence by the government. However, one mass media that did not change for that, or the government tried to censor it, but it did not change, are newspapers, which can be referred to two different aspects of why it did not change, which is written culture. To explain a bit of written culture, newspapers have words in them. It was not rapid face, and it's not from a third party, but from a writer themselves. And individuals who read the newspapers can take the time and interpret what they're reading from themselves. And also due to the nature of journalism and the integrity of journalism as well, where writers will place the facts or the truth of the event and then add their questions and question the reader about what is happening, and then their opinions, which has a really big effect on persuading the reader to understand what the mob is about or join the movement, so forth. This affects the people's views on mass media and the importance of thereof. Asking the interviewees, some answers that we got are how it affects how people see society or the temperature of society, perspectives of history, freedom of expression in politics, and also the reflections of each individual towards Blood May. So we can assume and conclude that mass media and how the press holds the message and how they hold the message, whether that's censorship or the fight for freedom of expression by adding personal persuasion and not from third-party persuasion like television, really makes a difference. The last point that we would like to touch on and also analyze is the power of telephones, as Blood May is also known as the telephone mob. So when we were asking our interviewees about other new types of media that they relied on or that they see are relevant, aside from newspaper, of course, half of our interviewees touch on the usage of telephones or the usage of personal telephones. Around this time, around Blood May, it is the birth of personal telephone usage, where most knowingly, Blood May is the first mob that used phones as a medium when other mass medias like television or the radio were heavily censored. And even though it's called the mob of the middle class, where rich people or reporters in newspaper firms own personal mobile phones more often than the general public, it is still being popularized, the idea of personal mobile phones, that it is starting to become a new major medium of information spreading and information being exchanged, which leads us to the very next point, which is how government couldn't really interfere with people using telephones or the exchanging of information through these things because of how early the stages of development it was. So some of the effects of this, of how the government couldn't take control of people using telephones, are the exchanging of information and the spreading of correct news, and how these gossips or buzzwords are able to persuade more people to join the mob or to join the movement and to understand what is happening in Blood May during that time. Other effects are the accelerating of the news, especially uncensored news from family, to bigger news such as CNN that is not in Thailand as well.
Jumping on to the demographic part, we have our own slides about demographic because we think that its information are as important and relevant to the analysis and the interviews questions asked. So for our group, we're gonna have 6 interviewees. The first one, as presented, would be Ingfa's father. So he was a magazine columnist and was in Bangkok at the time the event happened. The second interviewee would be Patanan's father, who was also in Bangkok and was a sophomore student at the time. The third one would be my own mother, or Suryagon's mother. So she was a senior student, but she was living in Ayutthaya at a period of time. The fourth and the fifth one would be Similan's father's friends. So they all were living in Bangkok at the time the Black Maze happened, but the fourth one would be a junior student and the other one would be the senior student. The last one would be Acharya Pon's father. So he was in Pathum Thani and was a high school student at the time. Now about the similarities and differences among those interviewees we have. The only similarity spotted is that they are at the average age of 50.8-year-old to 51-year-old. And now about the differences, here's the important point. So people who are at the different locations when Black May happened would be differently influenced by various choice of media. Let's say just my mom, who was in Ayutthaya, would be influenced more by the radio or the newspaper, while people at the location scene, which is Bangkok, would be influenced more by the phone, since it's called a phone protest or the phone mob. The other important points to make here is that the fact that we choose interviewees that have different occupations at a period of the time where Black May happens is because that we believe that people with different jobs would have different influence of the media use. As when my mom was a student at a period of time that has, almost no money and was poor, she would only have access to the radio or the newspaper, the only cheap ones. While Ingfa's father, who was already employed, so already employed people will have, more access to the higher media use as the phone, so these difference in values, incomes, and education will dictate influence on the media use of the people.
To recap our presentation, we have presented about the history of Blood May and the surroundings of the event as well, such as the economic, political, media, and the cultural landscape. The 4 concepts, theories, and perspectives, along with the analysis that we would like to touch on later in our essay, and also the demographic of our 6 interviewees as well. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and we hope that you continue to look forward to our essay. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day or night.